So during Diwali celebrations at the White House, US President Donald Trump spoke of his great conversation, as he put it, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi on trade and not having wars with Pakistan, and how Prime Minister Narendra Modi was a great friend of his over the years. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's response on social media platform X was crisp, short and firm. He wrote, "Thank you, President Trump, for your phone call and warm greetings on Diwali. On this festival of light, may our two great democracies continue to illuminate the world with hope and stand together, stand united against terrorism in all its forms." The sting very clearly is in the tail.
It was meant to be a warm Diwali greeting from Washington to New Delhi. But US President Donald Trump's phone call to Prime Minister Modi has sparked more controversy than celebration. The call was not only about exchanging Diwali greetings for Prime Minister Modi. Modi used the Diwali moment to subtly remind Trump what matters, standing united against terrorism. A pointed message considering Trump's recent outreach to Pakistan's military top brass. Prime Minister Modi said, "India stands with the US in fighting all forms of terror." Earlier, Trump lit the ceremonial Diwali lamp at the White House as Indian origin leaders and business figures applauded, including Indian envoy Vinay Quatra, FBI Chief Kash Patel and Hindu US Intel Chief Tulsi Gabbard. But what followed did not sit well in India. US President once again claimed credit for India-Pakistan truce, despite numerous Indian denials.
We did talk a little while ago about let's have no wars with Pakistan, and I think the fact that trade was involved, I was able to talk about that, and we have no war with Pakistan and India, and that was a very, very good thing. But he's a great person.
India has time and again said that it agreed for ceasefire only after Pakistan commanders pleaded with Indian forces to stop Operation Sindoor. Trump, however, made a big climb down on India buying oil from Russia. Going back on his earlier remark that India will completely stop buying Russian oil, Trump claimed Modi has told him that India will not buy much Russian oil.
India will not be buying oil from Russia. And, they've already de-escalated and they've more or less stopped. They're pulling back. They bought about 38% of the oil, and they won't be doing it anymore. He's not going to buy much oil from Russia. He wants to see that war end as much as I do. He wants to see the war end with Russia, Ukraine. And as you know, they're not going to be buying too much oil. So they've cut it way back, and they're continuing to cut it way back.
Meanwhile, the opposition led by Congress jumped in, accusing Prime Minister Modi of hiding facts. But the facts speak for themselves. It is Trump making claims, not Modi confirming them.
जहां प्रधानमंत्री छुपाते हैं, वहीं राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप उसका खुलासा करते हैं। ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के बारे में पहली जानकारी हमें राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप से मिलती है। रूस से तेल खरीदने की जो अभी रुकावट के संकेत आ रहे हैं, उसकी जानकारी हमें राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप से मिल रहा है। प्रधानमंत्री क्या छुपा रहे हैं, किस दबाव में है?
Prime Minister as well as the Cabinet Minister and the Commerce Minister will have to explain to the people of the country that what are the give and takes that have happened and how is it benefiting India, and is US oil going to be a lot more beneficial to us to buy as compared to the Russian oil, is something for the government of India to tell us. Have we buckled under, or have we maintained our own and continue to have a dialogue on our terms and conditions?
So while Trump lights lamps and drops sound bites, Modi keeps it clear. India stands for peace, but won't bow to pressure. Bureau Report, India Today.
So there are two sets of issues here: trade and terror, India-US trade, and Pakistan state-sponsored radical Islamist terror, and of course the issue of Russian oil. Is there a shift, even if it's a subtle shift, in the US stance Joining me on India First is Ambassador Meera Shankar, India's former ambassador to the United States of America. Also with me is Daniel Block, senior editor of Foreign Affairs. Seema Sirohi is a columnist and author of Friends with Benefits, the India-US story, joins us from Washington, D.C. Anand Ranganathan is an author and analyst. Siddharth Zarabi is group editor, Business Today. I first want to cut across to Ambassador Meera Shankar. Ambassador, help us understand Donald Trump's Diwali message and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's response. Do they appear to be on the same page, or at least getting there, if not there already, on trade and Pakistan terror?
I would say that the tone of the messages exchanged is certainly a cause for a little light at the end of the tunnel. You see some light at the end of the tunnel because the harsh rhetoric from the Trump administration in its early days has been toned down, and there have been efforts to reach out to the Indian government. From the Indian government side, negotiations have resumed, trade talks have resumed, and the last message, not this one, the last message that Prime Minister Modi sent, talked of good progress in the trade talks and the fact that the two leaders will monitor and review what is happening there. So I would say that the scenario appears uh, more optimistic, and that there has been a conscious effort to try to reduce or moderate the tensions which had developed in the relationship.
Okay.
Whether this will
Ambassador Shankar, okay, go on, ma'am. Please complete your point, ma'am.
sorry, whether this will actually lead to a trade deal being signed in the near future is something we have to wait and watch, because there have been many twists and turns in this tale.
Oh, absolutely. And President Trump appears to be linking trade both to Russian oil and peace with Pakistan. Do you get that impression? In both, does he appear to be, at least on the face of it, barking up the wrong tree?
Well, Russian oil and trade, I think the US has been linking from the time that it imposed 25% extra tariffs on India on account of India's Russian oil purchases. And of course, Trump has claimed that India has, or Prime Minister Modi has assured him that we will not be buying Russian oil. But now he has, in the face of the statement made by the Indian government, which said that India looks to diversify its sources of trade, that President Trump has moderated his statement to say India will not be buying much oil from Russia. So I suppose that what they're really looking at is purchasing more from the United States by way of energy. And to some extent, the oil purchases by Indian PSUs from Russia have already come down, though private sector in India is still buying at a fairly robust pace. So I suppose the Indian preference is to actually, as we've said, diversify sources of trade. So buy more energy from the United States. The question is, can the US also give us guaranteed supplies? Because they've been limiting supplies off and on. And also, would it be competitive, in terms of price and our commercial bottom line? I think these are two things.
And linking trade and peace with Pakistan?
I don't think that's a direct linkage. He always refers to it in terms of his having talked to Prime Minister Modi at the time of the cross-border conflict, after Operation Sindoor, and that he raised trade issues and that both countries said we want to trade. But this was denied by the Indian side, that any such conversation had taken place. And So this is an issue on which I think the two sides seem to have divergent views, and where President Trump obviously has a bee in his bonnet because it keeps recurring. It's a theme
Yes.
which keeps recurring in each of his conversations. He reiterates this. But I don't think that there is a direct linkage.
Okay. And what explains this change in US stance, according to you, within a week? So on the 15th of October, President Trump claimed Prime Minister Narendra Modi assured him India will not be buying oil from Russia. Today, he says India is not going to buy much oil from Russia. So is this, that reassurance, or has he accepted the fact that India will continue to buy oil wherever it's competitive, wherever India gets discounts, and will not be bullied into submission and to stop buying Russian oil?
I think that probably we will try to find some kind of via media, as I said, making more purchases from the US, and perhaps some of our purchases of Russian oil may come down, but certainly we are not going to allow any other country to dictate from where we will buy oil.
Okay. Seema Sirohi, is this a change in the US stance? Has US realized India cannot be browbeaten into stopping, the procurement of Russian oil?
Well, in not such stark terms, but what I think is happening is Americans, including President Trump and his cabinet members, are realizing that they can't do it alone. The latest move from China, putting export controls on really severe export controls on rare earths, has really shaken them up. They didn't have a strategy, they didn't expect it. So suddenly there was a change in tone by the Treasury Secretary first that, it's the world against China and we need our partners and allies to help. So I think there is that going on. And in terms of India, US in particular, the fact that India is pretty much stuck to its stand for all these months, I think has conveyed its own message, I would say. So that's happening.
Okay.
Then the Diwali event at the White House, as you might have seen, the Indian American members of President Trump's cabinet, they came under some very severe attack for even just wishing everybody a happy Diwali. And in light of that, I saw that event as important and an important message. Whether the crowd in MAGA takes it that way or not, I think it was important from the White House's point of view and from the US point of view to say, to show that President Trump celebrated Diwali. So I think all in all, I would agree with Ambassador Shankar that things are moving in the right direction. There'll be a
Okay.
lot of, glitches along the way, but
Okay.
overall things are positive.
Okay, Anand Ranganathan, this would indicate India stood firm. The United States tried to bully India, browbeat India. All the harsh words that were used by the MAGA ecosystem, India didn't relent, and now it appears it may be subtle, but the US has or is relenting.
Good evening, Gaurav, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Look, Ambassador Miraji talked of light at the end of the tunnel. Well, to be honest, it depends who's seeing it. If Trump is seeing it, then I'm afraid that light is coming from the train called Modi that's going to run him over. Because the fact is, Trump has been foxed by the carrot and stick strategy of Modi. The bully is not able to comprehend why. When the EU and most of Latin America has succumbed to his bullying, Modi is standing up to him. Modi's foreign policy, Gaurav, his maneuvers in the last couple of months have been spectacular to say the least. He is matching Trump transaction for transaction. He has, in continuing to buy Russian oil, not only exposed Trump's hypocrisy of imposing extra 25% tariffs selectively of India, even as the EU and the US continue to buy more Russian energy. By going to Beijing and standing with Xi, Modi has shown Trump his place. And since the time Trump slapped those 25% extra tariffs, we've bought 130 million more barrels of Russian oil. We are as independent as we've ever been. We continue to buy as much as 40% of our oil imports from Russia. Number two, but more than Trump, the problem is the opposition leaders who are using him to get at Modi. Rahul Gandhi, for example. First, their dead economy concurrence, when India is in fact the fastest growing large economy, posting highest ever forex exports, PMI, GST collection in Sensex. And then Stalin, concurring that Indian elites were profiteering from Russian oil. Not only is this strategy of opening the gates from the inside shameful, it is going to be further from the truth. Let me explain very briefly. Number one, Tamil Nadu's Chennai Petroleum Corporation Limited has been refining 80,000 barrels per day of Russian oil over the past 2 years and then distributing half of it, 40,000 barrels per day, locally inside Tamil Nadu.
Yes.
Those profiting from this are not elites, but ordinary Tamilians. Additionally, Tamil Nadu government has imposed upwards of 15% levy on fuel that goes into state coffers. So who is profiting from Russian oil to the tune of 7,000 crores? Stalin's government. Number two, the Indian government has directly earned upwards of $3 billion from Reliance as windfall for exporting refined Russian oil, some of it to America, in fact. The people who have profited from this are not elites, but ordinary Indians. India has saved, Gaurav, just 10 seconds, $26 billion over the past 3 years by choosing Russian oil over Saudi oil, not just because of discounted Russian oil, but also because increasing our procurement of it has lowered oil prices in general, saving us money for the rest of our oil procurement. Without that, our inflation would have risen cumulatively 1.47% beyond its actual level in those years, helping the poor and the disadvantaged, not the elite. This is the situation right now. So we are showing the bully his place. I hope Rahul Gandhi learns his place.
Okay. I'll come to that domestic politics that you raise very effectively in a moment. Daniel Block, has India displayed amply, not just to the US, but to the world, that India did not get bullied and refuses to get bullied on Russian oil and on Trump's repeated claims on ceasefire allegedly brokered? Because Trump may have had a conversation with Pakistan. Clearly, there was nothing that stopped India from bombing Pakistan except Pakistan pleading for a ceasefire.
I'd say two things, or really I'd say three things. First, I don't think we should get ahead of ourselves here and assuming we're reaching some sort of resolution. We're dealing with Donald Trump. This is a man who changes his mind all the time. And we've been hearing positive noises of various sorts for months now, and we still haven't seen a resolution. So I want to be very cautious and measured at assuming that we're reaching some kind of conclusion from which we can take away definitive answers. I would say I'll start with the Pakistan topic, and then I'll move to the Russian oil one. I think the wider world sees the Pakistan issue a little bit differently from the way it's seen in India. My sense is that the wider world, not just people in the United States, but also people in Europe, do think that the United States was involved in brokering some sort of ceasefire there. Not to the extent that Trump claims. They don't think he single-handedly ended it, but they do think that the United States played a diplomatic role in resolving that. That's what reporting has shown, and I think that's what Europeans think as well as Americans. On the Russian oil front, I mean, again, it's really hard for me to know how far or how close we are to some sort of resolution here because we're dealing with Trump and information that comes from him. My best guess is that we are negotiating there to some sort of resolution in which neither side is going to get what they want, but both sides are going to get an outcome that they can walk away with, that they're happy with, and that they can portray to their own people as a victory. So that would look something like India buys less Russian oil than it did before while still buying Russian oil, at which point it can say, Modi can say, we stood up to Trump, we stood up to the United States, we're still buying Russian oil, we won't be intimidated by anybody. And Trump, meanwhile, can say to Americans, they're buying less Russian oil, look, they're buying more of our oil, look, we used our tariffs, we used our leverage, and we got them to change their economic behavior. And of course, that's how most conflicts end these days, right? It's rarely a clear-cut victory or defeat for one side. It's an outcome that both parties can sell as a victory to their own people.
Okay, except the fact remains that from saying India is not going to buy any oil from Russia, he's at least today saying not much oil. But Siddharth Zaravi, are the two leaders, when they meet on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit, is there forward movement on the trade deal, or it's been so far and yet so near and yet so far all along since the Prime Minister met him in February and then again May June when the leaders met again, not the leaders but the delegations met again?
Gaurav, I think it's going to be a very significant meeting, although we are waiting for a final word and confirmation from New Delhi on that proposed meeting. Were it to happen, most likely it will. This would be the first meeting after February this year, if you remember, between the two leaders. And I think it's going to be very, very significant. What has changed between that period when our negotiations had also kind of broken off to now when a delegation of Indian officials has returned just this Sunday after a meeting? I think there is some sense that is building up, although I must caution all our viewers and say it very clearly that we do not have official word on this. But it's clear that this 50% tariff cannot stay if there has to be any kind of forward movement. So taking that off, bringing that back to near the original levels pre the Trump tariffs kicking in is very clearly something that will enable India to ultimately shake hands. The contours of some of the news reports that we have seen are a question of detail and debate. But remember, on Russian oil, we must not forget that we already purchase between $22 to $23 billion of US crude oil. And officials have told us that the scope to expand further purchases of US oil is to the extent of at least $10 to $12 billion more. So if India were to buy more US crude, it will obviously reduce some other kind of crude. So perhaps that might answer this question on the tonality and the different use of words. And finally, it's very important and a coincidence, and some of our panelists here would understand the importance, that this meeting at Kuala Lumpur would take under the ASEAN summit umbrella. And remember, India signed a trade deal with ASEAN. We had great hopes from that trade deal when it was signed. It's proven to be very, very unequal for India. We have a significant deficit, and China has been dumping goods through the ASEAN route into India. And so I find it of particular interest that if there were to be a forward movement and a handshake of sorts around the India-US trade deal happening in Kuala Lumpur, it would, in the long term, be very significant for the Indian economy, because the earlier deal at that very same city has proven to be detrimental to Indian interests and Indian companies.
Ambassador Shankar, on that Pakistan terror front, India and the United States very clearly are not on the same page. If Trump wants, good ties with Pakistan without mentioning any pressure on Pakistan to take action against terror, and Pak terror that continues to bleed India, how do you read Prime Minister Narendra Modi's message that stand together against terror in all its forms?
Well, because American memory seems to be a bit short on this aspect. The Central Command head has basically given Pakistan, good marks for helping to nab terrorists. But, that was also the Pakistani strategy, even during the years that they were supporting the US so-called fight against terror in Afghanistan. They were supporting the Taliban. They were supporting Osama bin Laden. And their strategy was, incrementally, whenever the pressure built up, hand over one person from, to somebody who's wanted to the US. So this would placate the US for the time being. So I think Pakistan is back to its old game. And the US, for whatever strategic reasons, maybe because of Iran, maybe because Pakistan is offering base facilities to them, whether they are going to accept it, we don't know. In Baluchistan, they're offering them a port. quite close to the Chinese base there in Gwadar. Whether they've offered listening posts already on the Iran border, we don't know, or so on. So, for its own strategic reasons, the US is again choosing to ignore some of the past history and, of course, the present policies that Pakistan still continues to follow vis-a-vis its neighbors, India and Afghanistan.
Indeed. Daniel Block, how do you read this? Because we in India find it very hard to comprehend why the US that killed Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad not push hard for action against terrorism on Pakistani soil. Does Trump think that India and Pakistan can be friends without action on terrorism? And especially after India has already bombed 11 air bases, brought down close to a dozen Pakistani warplanes and targeted 9 terror bases and 11 air bases?
I think there's two explanations. The first is, and this is, I think, the less powerful explanation of the two, but it's still operating, so I'll put it out anyway. The United States still sees some value to having a relationship with Pakistan for a couple of reasons. Just to name one big one, that they don't want Pakistan falling entirely into China's orbit for geopolitical reasons. They still want to maintain some kind of working relationship with the country. So I do think that that's a factor here and part of why the United States is trying to maintain some kind of working relationship with Pakistan. There are other reasons why it believes it's in its interest to do that as well. But the other thing is, I don't think there's a lot of coherent logic to much of Trump's foreign policy. And I think that antagonizing India and shifting more toward Pakistan falls in that category. This is not something that I think most of the American foreign policy community believes is in the United States' strategic interest. But Trump is doing it anyway. And that just defines a lot of what Trump does on the international stage and on the domestic stage.
Okay, Anand Ranganathan, for Donald Trump, is it more about, a crypto deal or family deals, or is he trying to wean Pakistan away from China? Is he being played by Pakistan?
I think it's a mix of all, but I think above the overarching aspect of whatever Trump indulging in is transactional. And I think at some point or the other, one has to respect that's the man he is. That's the man America chose. So I don't think India should mind the way Trump is behaving. The difference now is that we can stand up to the bullying. I mean, America is perfectly in its own right to do whatever it feels is in its best interest. Now, for decades, we felt it, but we never achieved it. Now we are achieving it. Let America be friends with Pakistan. Let America consider almost China as an enemy country and yet trade $600 billion with it. We will trade with America. We will trade with Russia. We will secure our energy as well as security interests. That is the difference right now. Otherwise, we should not mind whatever the other country does. I mean, for heaven's sake, 80% of Pakistan's armed arsenal comes from China. And we have a trade of $125 billion with China.
True, true. Seema Sirohi, you've been covering this foreign policy from the Indian side, from the American side over decades. So do you notice this harder stance when it comes to India responding to the United States and how it deals with Pakistan, keeping Indian interests first? So, for example, because the Americans were in Afghanistan, a lot of time American interests were supreme. So even if Pakistan was hitting us in Kaluchak or after Parliament attack, India would not hit back, or 26/11, India did not hit back. But now, India's hit out at 9 terror camps, 11 air bases, brought down a dozen Pakistani warplanes.
See, it's as far as US and Pakistan relations getting closer or further apart, it's a cycle. Right now, Pakistan falls in a very sweet spot as far as various events that are going on in the world. And we have to give them credit for sort of being ahead of the curve. They figured out what moves President Trump and his inner circle, and they acted accordingly. And India is not a country like that. It won't do those things. Those things are very clear. So, and also don't forget that they are being assisted, Pakistan that is, with a band of lobbyists, not only paid by Pakistan, but paid by a couple of other Gulf countries who do part-time, lobbying for Pakistan. The overall thing that they want to achieve by opening their country to anything and everything that Trump wants is that Trump would put pressure on India to come to the negotiating table on Kashmir. Something that hasn't happened and is very unlikely to happen. But that's their hope. That is the Pakistani hope. And so far, they are in a good position. And if you remember, at the time of the conflict, the 4-day conflict, Operation Sindoor, and the ceasefire, Marco Rubio had put a tweet in which he had said that India and Pakistan will meet in a third country,
third place,
etc.
yeah.
That was totally out of the blue, right? And why did he write it? It was at, I think, behest of Pakistan, to please Pakistan, to get them completely, on the American side. Um, so it's right now very messy how much Pakistan actually achieves with the US in terms of strategic benefit remains to be seen. But in terms of PR and all the other soft stuff, they have achieved quite a bit because President Trump seems to be pretty open to the idea and all the ideas that General Munir is putting forth.
Okay, Anand Ranganathan wants to come in. I also want to have put a question to Ambassador Shankar, but Anand, go first.
No, I mean, great points by Seemaji, but I'll just like to add something. The difference has to be highlighted, and it's very clear for the citizens of India. That's why I say, in Chidambaram, he is on record that when he was the Home Minister, the Americans came to him and said, please cool down, do not attack Pakistan. And we relented. And today the situation is Americans come and say, please don't do it. We bomb 11 of their targets. And they say, please don't buy Russian oil. And we buy 130 million barrels of it. So the difference is there for everyone to see. Who is surrendered is the question that need not even be answered. It's very clear.
And Ambassador Shankar, you think it's working for Pakistan? I mean, when you look at Pakistan today, so they may get a free lunch at the White House. Pakistan's being slammed across. Afghanistan is bashing them up. They're killing Tehreek-e-Labbaik people in their own country. I believe a dozen people were killed in Balochistan. There are lives being lost in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And they're saying, somehow get India to talk to us on Kashmir. Do you see that? Do you see that happen? Do you think India-Pakistan talking on Kashmir?
No, I don't see that happening. I think Pakistan has so many domestic issues to resolve. Their economy is in a black hole. It's being completely kind of sustained through debt rescheduling and inflows from either China or the Gulf. It's heavily indebted because of the China-Pak economic corridor, because the terms were not really beneficial, high interest rates and excessive costs and so on. And at the same time, its polity has been going through a difficult phase with Imran Khan, the most popular politician in Pakistan, in jail, his followers in jail, and insurgencies in Balochistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in the frontier areas, the tribal areas. So, and the Pakistani Taliban also. So, and then it has tense relations with both of its neighbors in the east as well as in the west, largely flowing from its own, overreach with regard to these countries. So I think Pakistan has to finally learn to cut its coat according to its cloth. If it is to stabilize itself, stabilize its economy, whereas what they do is to look for some external benefactor, offer him facilities for sale, or her, I mean, whichever country, and then hope through this external support to balance India. So it's been a policy which has not helped them to balance India, but has sunk them because
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
locked them into a policy of strategic overreach, as I call it. They have to find a way to unlock themselves from it, look at stabilizing the economy, look at building political consensus within their country to be able to move forward.
And clearly, Siddharth, that doesn't seem to be happening. But for that, somebody in Pakistan would need to have a stable mind. And when a radical Islamist like Mullah Asim Munir leads that country, and when you hear his speeches, or even Shamshad Beg, that country really, seems to be going through hell and seem going down. But does the US really think that it can use trade as a weapon, to get India to mend fences with Pakistan, like Trump referred, even if it was after, during Operation Sindoor or immediately after Op Sindoor?
The fact is that the United States, and like most presidents, it has also launched a series of battles and perhaps one mega war called the trade war with multiple nations. And if you see nation upon nation, including Japan, the benefits for the United States are very limited. The jury is out on what it will mean for prices and the shift back to the United States. With China, it's clear that the escalation that China has done on rare earths is actually the most significant chapter in the recent past of the United States being told that trade is not a weapon that it can use so freely. In the Indian context, I think it's very clear there has been a hit, but that hit is perhaps on account of misplaced United States priorities. Okay. Were we to see a resolution and a settlement and a lowering of rates and perhaps some purchases give and take from both sides, it will be clear that we are on the path of restoring our trade relationship. Will a big mega omnibus trade deal emerge in the next few days? I would say that we should hold our horses on that particular point.
Fair enough. I will let that be the last word on this part of the show. I want to thank all my guests for joining me here.